The wagon train had been rolling across the endless prairie for 3 months when Martha Elizabeth Hayes finally understood the truth that had been whispered behind her back. At barely 5 feet tall and weighing no more than a sparrow, she wasn't strong enough for the hard life that waited at trail's end. She had tried so hard to prove them wrong. Every morning she rose before dawn to help with the cooking. She mended torn clothing by firelight until her eyes burned. When the other women struggled with heavy water buckets, Martha would take on 2 loads, her small frame trembling with the effort. But still, the whispers followed her like prairie wind. Poor little thing won't last a winter out here. Someone that size? Well, it's just not practical. The men need wives who can pull their weight. The morning they reached Fort McKinney, Martha sat quietly on a wooden crate as families reunited and new couples were introduced. One by one, the other women found their matches. Strong women, capable women, women who could work a plow and birth children and stand shoulder to shoulder with a man against whatever hardships lay ahead. By evening, Martha sat alone, watching the last wagon disappear into the golden sunset. The fort commander, a kindly man with gray whiskers, offered her a small room and work in the commissary. It was honest work, he assured her, and she would be safe. But as Martha unpacked her few belongings that night, she felt the weight of being unwanted settle around her shoulders like a heavy shawl. 3 days later, she met Benjamin. Martha was struggling to carry a sack of flour to the commissary when a shadow fell across her path. She looked up ... and up ... and up. The man standing before her was easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. His long black hair was braided with leather strips, and his dark eyes held a gentleness that surprised her. Without a word, he lifted the flour sack from her arms, as if it weighed nothing at all. His Comanche heritage was clear in his features, but he dressed like the other settlers wore leather pants, a simple cotton shirt, boots that had walked many miles. Where does this go? He asked, his voice deep and quiet. Martha pointed toward the commissary, too startled to speak. She had heard stories about the Comanche fierce warriors who could ride like the wind and fight like thunder. But this man moved with careful deliberation, as if he was afraid his size might frighten her. I'm Benjamin, he said, setting the flour sack down exactly where she indicated. Benjamin White Eagle, Martha, she managed. Martha Hayes, he nodded once, a slight smile touching his lips. It's good to meet you, Martha Hayes. Over the following weeks, Benjamin appeared whenever Martha faced a task too heavy for her small hands. He never offered, he simply saw a need and filled it. When the commissary roof needed repair, he climbed up with hammer and nails. When firewood ran low, he arrived with logs balanced on his shoulders. When Martha mentioned that her room grew cold at night, he appeared the next morning with a beautiful quilt his grandmother had made. The other women at the fort began to take notice. That big Indian seems quite taken with little Martha, they whispered, but their whispers had changed. Now they carried a note of wonder rather than pity. Martha found herself looking forward to Benjamin's quiet presence. He would sit on the commissary steps in the evenings, whittling small figures from wood while she swept the floors. They didn't talk much at first, but the silence between them felt comfortable, like an old friendship. One evening, as autumn painted the cottonwoods gold, Benjamin set down his carving and looked at her seriously. Martha, he said, I've been thinking about building a cabin, somewhere peaceful, away from all the noise and judgment. A place where a person could just ... be. Martha stopped sweeping. That sounds wonderful, Benjamin. Would you like to see it? The land? I found a spot by Cedar Creek, about 5 miles north. There's good water, and the soil is rich. Plenty of timber for building. The next morning, they rode out together on Benjamin's gentle mare. Martha had never felt so small as when she sat in front of him on that horse, but she had never felt so safe either. His arms formed a protective circle around her as they rode through the amber prairie grass. The land he showed her was everything. He had promised. Cedar Creek ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Wild roses grew thick along the banks, and tall cottonwoods provided blessed shade. It was a place that whispered of peace and possibility. Asterisk here, Benjamin said, dismounting, and helping her down. Right here is where I'd build it. Asterisk Martha could see it in her minda. Sturdy log cabin with a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings. A garden where she could grow vegetables and flowers. A chicken coop where she could raise hens. Something she'd always wanted to do but never had the space for. Asterisk, it would be a good place for someone small to make a big difference, Benjamin said quietly. Asterisk Martha felt tears prick her eyes. All her life, people had focused on what she couldn't do because of her size. Benjamin was the first person to suggest that being small might actually be an advantage. Asterisk, how do you mean? She asked. Asterisk, small hands are better for delicate work. Small bodies need less food, can slip through tight spaces, can see details that big people miss. And sometimes, he said, his dark eyes meeting hers, the world needs gentleness more than it needs strength. Asterisk, that evening, as they rode back to the fort, Martha made her decision. Asterisk, Benjamin. She said softly, would you like some help building that cabin? Asterisk, she felt, rather than saw his smile. I'd like that very much. Martha Hayes. Asterisk, they were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the fort. Martha wore her mother's pearl earrings and a new blue dress that Benjamin's grandmother had sewn for her, a dress that fit her perfectly, as if it had been made with love rather than just measurements. Asterisk, the cabin took shape slowly through the autumn months. Benjamin cut and hauled the logs, his strength making quick work of the heavy timber. But it was Martha who chinked the gaps with mud and moss, her small hands able to work in spaces his couldn't reach. She planned the layout of the rooms, chose where each window should go to catch the morning light, and designed a kitchen that would be efficient for someone her size. Asterisk, when the first snows came, they moved into their new home. It wasn't largest, 2 rooms and a loft, but every inch had been built with purpose and love. Martha's garden plot lay waiting under the snow, marked with stakes that Benjamin had carved with her initials. Asterisk, on their first Christmas in the cabin, Martha made a discovery that changed everything. While organizing Benjamin's few possessions, she found a small wooden box filled with letters. Letters from the Indian agent, from the army, from territorial officials. All asking Benjamin White Eagle to serve as a translator, a guide, a mediator between the white settlers and the remaining Comanche bands. Asterisk, you turned down all of these, Martha said, holding up the letters. Important work. Good pay, asterisk, Benjamin looked up from the fire he was tending. I had more important work here, asterisk, building a cabin, asterisk, building a home, he corrected gently. There's a difference. Asterisk, Martha understood then what he had sacrificed for her, and what he had gained. Benjamin had chosen to use his strength not for glory or profit, but to create a place where a small woman could bloom, and in doing so, he had found something he had never expected: a partner who saw past his imposing size to the gentle heart beneath. Asterisk, as winter deepened, neighbors began to appear at their door. Word had spread about the big Comanche and his tiny wife who lived by Cedar Creek. Travelers lost in snowstorms found shelter in their cabin. Pregnant women came to Martha for her gentle care and Benjamin's steady presence. Children who were afraid of his size learned to trust his quiet kindness. Asterisk, their home became a refuge, a place where size didn't matter, and judgment was left at the door. Martha discovered that being small allowed her to offer comfort in ways that larger people couldn't. She could sit beside a frightened child without towering over them. She could tend to delicate tasks that required patience rather than strength. She could make a large man feel protective rather than threatened. Asterisk, and Benjamin learned that strength used in service of love was the most powerful force of all. Asterisk, years passed gently at the cabin by Cedar Creek. Martha's garden grew famous throughout the territory for its abundance, proof that small hands could nurture great things. Benjamin's reputation as a fair and honest man spread, bringing people from hundreds of miles away to seek his counsel. Asterisk, they never had children of their own, but their home was always full of life. Young couples starting out would come to learn from their example. Elderly folks found comfort in their steady presence, and anyone who had ever felt too small, too different, or too unwanted found acceptance at their table. Asterisk, on quiet evenings. Martha and Benjamin would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over the prairie they had claimed as home. Sometimes, Martha would remember that day at Fort McKinney when she had sat alone, believing herself unwanted. Do you ever wonder? She would ask Benjamin, what would have happened if that wagon train had taken me? Benjamin would reach over and take her small hand in his large one. I don't wonder, he would say. I'm grateful they didn't. They couldn't see what I could see, that the best things often come in the smallest packages. And in the growing dusk, surrounded by the home they had built together. Martha finally understood that being left behind had been the first step toward finding where she truly belonged.